Oh my god, hey!
Hello.
Welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Joe.
And I'm Aaron James.
And we both work in the theatre industry here in the UK. And today we are at Beam, which is an annual conference all about new musical theatre in the UK. This is both of our first time attending. We're here in Oxford, in historic Oxford. The Ashmoleans over there, somewhere. And we're here at the Oxford Playhouse to see a bunch of new musicals and some panel discussions. I'm speaking on one of the panel discussions this afternoon. I'm only slightly nervous about it. And network with people who work in musical theatre in the UK. So come with us to Beam 2023. Okay, the day has begun. We have registered. We have lanyards. I can't show you my lanyard. There you go. That's my lanyard. I have a surname. It's news to you all. And I have a fruity breakfast, orange juice and a banana. And we have programs detailing everything that is going on today that I'll tell you more about as it happens. But the day is going to begin with a welcome, I believe, at 10:30, and then the first musical showing is at 10:45. There's a bunch of new musicals being shown today, but just like snippets. There are some 10-minute presentations and there are some 30-minute presentations with some panel discussions in the middle. So much to look forward to. Very exciting. And we're already seeing so many people that we recognise from the industry, from press nights, from Twitter, / some people we've met before. So lots going on. Slightly overwhelming, but very exciting. So this is the auditorium here at Oxford Playhouse. You can see the little setup they've got here on the stage. Obviously we're going to be seeing many different little musical presentations today of many different genres, tones and styles. And we've got this, as I mentioned, this is a programme of events for the day. I'll show you the itinerary. Here it is. So this is what we're about to have here. It's this first little block of 5 consecutive 10-minute new musical presentations, and you can read a little bit more about them here. It tells you who they're written by, tells you about what stage of development they're in, the style of the piece, the ideal size of cast and band, and then some context. I'm very excited. This is like the perfect day for me, honestly. Kid in a candy shop right now, in which the candy is new musical theatre. Okie dokie, so we just saw 5 10-minute snippets of developing musicals at different stages of development. I feel like the stage has changed colour. I feel like it was orange before, now it is blue and red. But we just saw some shows, and I'm going to try and tell you about some of them now. Okie dokie, there is so much networking going on. I have taken to the streets of Oxford. I've stepped outside to tell you about some of the shows that we just saw a preview of. So first up was a show called Cocktails in the Departure Lounge, and this is centred all around someone throwing themselves a funeral while they're still alive. It's called A Living Wake. It was very funny. It was performed by the 3 people who have also written it. It screamed Edinburgh Fringe to me. The songs that we heard reminded me of a lot of those comedy songs from female comedy groups like Flo and Joan, like Fascinating Aida. It was that kind of a vibe. It would do very well at the Edinburgh Fringe because it's a zany, out there, hilarious concept with some very funny material. So I enjoyed that very much. They're currently in very early development, looking for interested parties. Then we had a complete change. The next musical was called Skoll, based on the true story of siblings Hans and Sophie Skoll, who basically were members of the Hitler Youth and the League of German Maidens during indoctrination in Nazi Germany, and came to a sort of their own political understanding and then rose up against the fascist regime. So it's a true story. It's already very interesting. I was very interested by this premise, and then the whole vibe of the show was very Spring Awakening. My fear with this was that it was going to be a little bit dry, a little bit colourless, but there was a lot of opportunities for humour because it's these teenage characters who are maybe a little bit initially indifferent to the severity of what is unfolding around them, and then we had some moments of tremendous pathos as well. But the music, very contemporary, very interesting. According to this, the script and score are completed, and it seemed like a really interesting production. I can actually see this going to somewhere like the Almeida, somewhere doing contemporary, edgy new musical theatre. Next up was Benny and the Grey Cat. So this is a new musical that has been in development since 2018, and they are hoping for a professional production in 2024. As such, they are currently seeking co-producers and venue partners. Now, it's set in Sheffield, so I do think there'd be something really lovely if they could do a production in Sheffield. And the concept of the show is that the audience are guests at the matriarch of an Anglo-Indian family's 50th birthday. Already I'm thinking something like semi-immersive would be very fun for this, drawing on all of that Indian culture and immersing the audience in that kind kind of an experience. So the music for this one draws on a lot of Indian cultural heritage, but then also elements of fusing that with jazz, because the writers were telling us it's based on their own family history of this actual jazz club that was formed in India. And you have this matriarch character who was so funny and so engaging. It's great to see like such a strong character at that stage of a show's development. If in that kind of a setting that character is already shining through, it's going to play very well on stage. I think this could be a really fun show, but they also need to really try and connect with that audience that, as they said, are very underrepresented on stage. So I also think it's an important show. Next up, we had a similarly important new musical called Coming Back Around, set in Glasgow and talking about poverty and talking about drugs and having important, necessary, under-platformed conversations, especially right now during a cost of living crisis. It was a 3-person musical, and again, just a really interesting sound that they had. Now, the story is set in Glasgow, but the themes of it are universal, and so they want this to be seen everywhere and anywhere. It does feel vital, it does feel important, it feels like we're talking about stuff that goes on constantly, but we don't talk about on stage. And tonally, it felt quite authentically Glaswegian, which is a little bit morose and morbid, but with a sort of a sarcastic spin on it as well. That's consistent with all of the Glaswegians I have met, at least. And then finally, we had The Optician of Lampedusa, a new song cycle, completely different to everything else that we'd heard before. Musically, this one was a lot more sort of virtuosic, with this amazing piano underscoring. This is designed to be a one-person show based on a harrowing true account of an optician living on a small island off the coast of Italy who discovers a scene of tremendous human tragedy during the migrant crisis. Another very important conversation that I think, again, underrepresented on stages, and a really interesting route into it. I think sometimes with something like A Come From Away is what this made me think of. Sometimes the best way to tell a story about that kind of an event is to find a more interesting, very human, very real and authentic pathway into it. So I think this is definitely a story worthy of adaptation, and I really like the music. It was giving me very Jason Robert Brown, it was giving me very L'Accusa in places. It was stunning and transporting and ornate, and a kind of writing that we don't hear a lot of in new musical theatre. Everything sounds sort of similarly contemporary, and this felt classic in a lot of ways, which I very much enjoyed. So now I am going to go back in and go and see 2 more new musicals before we have some panel discussions at lunchtime. Oh my god, hey, I'm having a really intense angle to get the lighting, because this is Ugly Mickey, and this is a slight improvement. But we are sat in the back of Oxford Playhouse like naughty school children, eating our lunch, because we just listened to an amazing producer panel talking about all sorts of things. There were some things that really struck me, but just fantastic to hear from a whole range of different producers talking about their experience and giving, I think, really beneficial advice to anyone who is here for that reason, to anyone who is a budding early career producer. Sorry, I'm leaning on you.
I am getting the full lean.
You are. It's because you're comfy. But mainly, I thought we would pop on here to tell you how great the lunch was, because Oxford Playhouse, who are hosting Beam today, have done a fantastic job. Their staff have been lovely.
Yeah, lovely.
And we got these little lunch bags, which had different types of salad. You had multiple gluten-free salad choices. I had falafel and greens. It was very nice. What did you go for?
The penne pasta and spinach.
Gluten-free, which was a specific gluten-free variant.
Yeah.
We love to see it, we love to eat it. And then we had a packet of crisps, high quality of crisp. And I had my second banana of the day.
I had a banana as well.
There you go. We're making good, healthy, nutritional choices here at Beam. But that has been the lunch review segment. It's cute. It makes it feel like I'm at a school activity.
It does feel like a full conference.
It does. Oh my god, hey, I am back on the streets of Oxford because like 3 different things have happened and I need to fill you in on them. And I've got about 9 minutes before I need to be back inside. So I have seen 2 more musical presentations at Beam 2023. I'm going to tell you about both of those first of all. So first up was Otto Weit's Brush and Broom Workshop for the Blind, which I will say is a heck of a title to contend yourself with, but at least it is specific and unique. And it also tells you everything about the show. This is another true story from from World War II era Germany. It's the true story of Otto Weidt, a blind German man who employed Jewish workers with visual impairments during World War II and shielded them from the Nazis, in a similar vein to Glory Ride, a new musical that's been on recently at the Charing Cross, also a little bit Schindler's List-esque, but in an emerging theme for the day, this is also an amazing show for representation because they have an ethos and a mission with this show all about accessibility, and this is something that we know that the theatre industry does not do nearly well enough. So as well as all of the obvious things around accessibility and casting and outreach, they have this amazing thing where there are visual descriptions of what's unfolding on stage incorporated into the script and into song lyrics, eliminating the need for headsets for anyone with visual impairments. I think that's very clever. I think it's very inclusive and accessible, and there's something I really enjoyed about that, actually. And it's done quite cleverly as well, in a way that it's not obvious. I just think it had an awful lot of heart and honesty and integrity, and perhaps it will go on to have a professional life, but I think also as well it would do really well with youth theatre, and I think it would be a really important youth theatre show as well. I think that would teach the next generation of theatre makers an awful lot. Afterwards, we had Jordan Lee Smith's musical The Boy Who Sailed the Ocean in an Armchair, based on the book of the same name. Now, this is actually going to be produced later this year. It has a production coming up produced by National Youth Music Theatre at the Leicester Curve, and I think that's going to be very exciting. So what we got to see was the first 15 minutes of the show. It's a very exciting premise, it's a very exciting beginning. The music is just stunning. Jordan described it as Matilda meets The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, both in terms of its visuals and its tone, and I completely get that from the little snippet that we saw. I'm excited, I'm intrigued, there are twists in this story that I need to know about. I am desperate to see the rest of it, and it sounded really exciting and uplifting. He also said it was a slightly more sophisticated Disney kind of a sound, and I got a lot of that as well. I want to hear more of the score of this show, and I want to see where this plot is going, and also very talented performers that they got to perform it today, including some very young, very talented performers. I was very impressed by that and quite taken with it. So after those, I immediately raced upstairs to go straight into my panel discussion. This was all about cultivating new audiences for musical theatre, and there were some much more experienced people than me on this panel alongside me, people from marketing and programming from various different venues. It was great to get to chat with them about cultivating new musical theatre audiences, but also talking about harnessing the power of social media, talking to the writers in the room, the producers in the room. I'm trying to remember some of the key things that I said, but mostly we talked around like knowing the audience of your show and not being afraid of specificity. I talked about a couple of other musicals that have tried to be everything to everyone, and that doesn't really work. I feel like it doesn't hurt to have a target audience and a demographic, utilizing the power of social media, making sure your content is dynamic and exciting. Whatever excites you about your show, that is the thing to use to pitch it to other people. From a marketing perspective, it pays to make sure that you can explain your show in just one sentence, because if you can't conceive what audiences are going to say to each other about your show, then you can't guarantee that word of mouth is going to spread in the way that you want it to. And we talked about success stories like Six releasing their cast album so people had the content there to enjoy. We talked about Operation Mincemeat and a couple of other shows as well. Something like Be More Chill being resurrected on its cast album. So some really interesting conversation came out of that, and some amazing things were said, and it was really fun. I was very nervous going into that, honestly, because I was thinking, I'm honoured to have been asked. What if it turns out I don't know anything? I don't have the experience in something like marketing that the people alongside me do, but then we got into it and it's like, oh, it turns out I do know things about things. And it was just really fun to chat about all things new musicals, because like I said on that, even though we were meant to be uplifting and inspiring, it is really hard. It is undeniably difficult to produce new musical theatre. Ultimately, I am happy to try and help in any way that I can. I'm having a great day at Beam. It is absolutely time for me to dash back inside now and go and see some more new musical previews before heading off. I've brought you down to the stage now to show you some of the sponsors of this year's Beam. So it's being presented by, that's Mercury Musical Developments, MMD, and the Musical Theatre Network in conjunction with Oxford Playhouse, where we are right now, with support using public funding by Arts Council England. We've also got sponsors here, the PRS Foundation, the Talent Development Partner, PPL, Musicals Magazine, there you go, Perfect Pitch, Music Theatre International, Concord Theatricals, Theatrical Rights Worldwide, these are licensing organisations, The Stage newspaper, of course, Global Musicals, and the Garrick Club Charitable Trust. Thank you to all of them for supporting this venture that does a lot to encourage, nurture, and support new musical theatre. Oh my god, hey! Hey, I'm back for day 2 of Beam at the Oxford Playhouse, celebrating all things new musical theatre in the UK. We had to duck out a little bit early and miss the last few new musical presentations yesterday because we had to get down to London for a press night, but we are back early this morning for some more new musicals. So let me tell you about the last few shows that I saw presentations of yesterday. So we had Flitch. This was a fascinating and lovely and weird little concept. So this is about the Flitch trials, which were a real 12th century bizarre tradition from Great Dunmow. It's a lost tradition. It's this very old thing where married couples have to convince a mock court that they haven't argued for 1 year and 1 day, which, I mean, I love this as a concept because when have you ever heard a piece of theatre being about something like that before? I love stuff that is conceptually so unique, and that is, I think, it's a marketing challenge, especially with that title, but a really interesting and fun concept. And the music was so genuinely really funny, probably some of the funniest stuff that I heard yesterday. This was written by Claire Packham and Fintan Keeley, and I just really loved the songs. I thought they were, like, I genuinely made me laugh, and some really fun material. I think what it is there's something effortlessly funny and so relatable about couples arguing and trying to pretend that they don't argue. I think that just gives way to so much easy comedy. Also, LGBT inclusive characters and lesbian characters. I've said many times, not enough queer women in musical theatre, so love that for representation. Next up was Seashore Yuanfen, where we got even more queer female representation. Loved this. This was kind of like familiar of Bridgerton style conceit. It's a romantic comedy, but in a more contemporary setting than Bridgerton. But you have these two characters who decide to pretend to date each other in order to avoid pressure from their parents. But it's an LGBTQIA plus romantic comedy musical, which is something I feel like we don't have a lot of. Certainly like queer history and queer side characters and queer trauma, but to have just like an unashamed rom-com musical about queer characters, I really like. This is written by Nemo Martin, Zhuining Chang and Nimrita Kaur. And I thought the material was really promising, especially considering this is an absolute first draft. They are seeking development and financial support for a workshop in late 2023 and resources for cast recording and production in late 2024. Exciting! And then the last thing I saw yesterday was The Wife of Michael Cleary. This was another 25-minute presentation, and we'd had a lot of like light-hearted comedy up to this point, but this was altogether a little more serious. So this is a new folk musical inspired by the true story of Bridget Cleary. This is a sort of a true crime history that has been adapted several times, but never so solidly from her perspective and with her as the central character in her own story, which obviously very important. Bridget was a young dressmaker from County Tipperary, Ireland, who in 1895 was burned to death by her husband and family because they believed her to be a fairy changeling, which, you know, we've all been there. Obviously this is super important. It's important to shine a light on this historical period, but then also it talks about violence against women, which is this issue that obviously still endures, and we should absolutely be platforming this on our stages. So I think very important show. It's been written by Maz O'Connor, who you can see pictured here, who spoke very passionately about the piece. The cast involved were all fantastic. It had this lovely folk score, which I think is this really popular thing in the UK right now. We're hearing many new musicals with folk scores, and I am all about it because I think folk music is naturally just so theatrically and thematically rich, and I just love the perspective that this show has as well. I love that we're telling this important story but centering Bridget so much in this narrative, and then calling it The Wife of Michael Cleary I think is also very clever. So that brings us up to the end of yesterday. Now I'm going to go back inside and go have a banana and go and see what's going on today at Beam. Okay, we're back in the auditorium of the Oxford Playhouse. We're sat at the back because we have breakfast that we're going to discreetly eat, but if anyone's interested, the lights, once again, different colours. We have orange and red this morning, sort of flame-like, for some fire new musical theatre. Flame emoji, flame emoji, flame emoji. Oh my god, hey! So the day started with 6 back-to-back new musical presentations of varying different lengths, varying tones and musical styles, and all very exciting. I'm going to do my best to tell you about them now in this 15-minute break. So we started with Cliffs, written by Elan Butler. So this has been developed on Pentabus Young Writers and Leicester Curve's playwriting course, led by writer Ben Wetherill, and it's been in the making for 2.5 years. I got really excited about this this one. It's about how the disappearance of a young girl affects a local community and how it brings a local community together, inspired by some true events but not based on fact necessarily. But it's the music that was really interesting. It describes itself here as Once Meets London Road, and it's a fusion of folk music with hip-hop that I thought was really contemporary, really original, one of the most unique things that I've heard so far, and I just got really excited about it. It's one of those energizing shows that you just really connect with, and that really happened for me with this one. So very excited about this. There's so many theatres I could see doing this. It has a very bold plan about its trajectory and what they want for this show, and hopefully they achieve it, because I think it's fantastic. Next up we had Ratburger. So this has been written by Robert White, who is hilarious, who is also a stand-up comedian, and has adapted the novel by David Williams. So it has that kind of a familiar family-friendly plot based on a children's book, girl meets rat, you know, the usual, and it's a children's comedy musical, and you could see this being super commercial. It sort of feels a little bit like a younger Matilda in terms of its score, but it was very sweet and very funny. It has a little bit of the Sweeney Todds to it as well, and so I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that an awful lot. Next up we had something very cute, Ukulele Days, a new musical. This has been written by Amy Claire Tasker, and it's written for ukulele, as you would expect. So we have a bunch of different ukulele actor musicians, which is fantastic, and it is set at a ukulele festival, and it has all of the charm and whimsy that you might expect with that. It is a romantic comedy. We meet these two musicians who were previously engaged and now rivals, and it's about them coming back together. It's very much ado about nothing, inspired with this Beatrice Benedict relationship, but they're competitive ukulele players at a ukulele festival. It's just charming to talk about, and the show has these very sweet ideas to do with ukuleles and people bringing their ukuleles, and it just has this buoyant and joyful sound that you get with that instrument. What I love about this is the writing clearly has this tremendous fondness for the ukulele, and it's just very sweet. It was a very sweet presentation. And another one that I think could actually be very commercial. It screams Edinburgh Fringe, and just joyful and nice, and I think you could do this show at festivals. Next up we had Pigeons. This is about local community, a sort of small town local community, and what it means for a place to be called a home, especially some of those places that you pass through on the way to somewhere more significant or more well known. This was another one that was very actor muso. There were accordions on stage. It's one of those shows where you're going to have actors multi-rolling and swapping different instruments, and we saw a handful of the vivid local characters that it is going to be portraying. This is a first draft of the show, but it had, again, just a lot of charm, a lot of sincerity, a lot of heart. It reminded me of Amelie in its score in some ways. Again, we had that kind of folk element, but just relatable and honest and down to earth, which I think is important. Then we had something completely different, Music and Freedom, written by Grace Taylor and Tim Gilvin, based on the award-winning Australian novel by Zoe Morrison. This is about a woman in her 70s who, after the death of her abusive husband, sort of finds herself. Now, she has been a pianist, and this is a show written for only one band member, which is a virtuoso pianist who is also featured on stage alongside the cast. So it's the story of Alice Hayward, who goes on a journey of rediscovery and rebirth through her friendship with her neighbour Emily. It's uplifting, it's inspiring, and the score is classical and ornate and rapturous, and features references to classical piano pieces. There's some Rachmaninoff in there. It's all very clever. There was one song in particular performed by Julie Legrand that was just sensational, just one of those real fantastic standout songs. It musicalizes this moment, which is just so clever and so dramatic, and it made a really big impact. Finally, we just saw hashtag 50 Days, which has also previously been presented as part of MT Fest. So this tells the story of the period that led up to the outbreak of the Civil War and draws a lot of comparisons with current society issues. It depicts a Britain which is divided along class lines during a time of enormous political difference, with the backdrop of a plague, all very familiar to modern day Britain. So the show is still very much in development for its full first draft, but it's already had this showcase at MT Fest, and there's going to be a full production as part of BYMT's summer program this year. Yay for BYMT, helping to develop all of these new musicals, and that's going to feature an enormous cast of young performers. Now, emerging through the doors that shows like Hamilton and Six have opened, this is telling a historic story using grime, and it was a really dynamic presentation because we had these call and response moments, and if you can get this crowd of producers and professional attendees shouting back along with with your call and response grime, I think you can do anything. I was very impressed, and this was one of the most galvanizing things I've seen over the past couple days, because it involves the audience in such a participatory way, and I think that's naturally theatrical. Even though we don't see a lot of grime on our stages, I think it has enormous potential, and hopefully this is going to be one of the shows that finds it. I'm heading back in now to go and see one more new musical before lunch. Oh my gosh. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to show you any of the presentation, but the next show is about pole dancing. I'll tell you more later, but they are actually setting up a pole on stage. Some of these have more staging than others. We've seen bits of choreography, but there is a pole being erected on the stage. I can't with this. What is happening at Beam? So we're in a lunch break right now, and today, because I don't have to run to immediately be on a panel discussion, we've found a park. We've found a nice park in Oxford for eating our little bagged lunches, our little £6 meal deal lunch from Oxford Playhouse. And I'm going to show you what's in our lunches. I told you yesterday, today I will show you. Here's Aaron enjoying his gluten-free pasta salad.
Yeah.
Looking very nice and tasty.
I was never into olives, but I feel like when my parents were always like, you'll like olives when you get older.
Has it happened? Is this the moment?
I now can eat them and not want to, not hate
Oh, that's how it starts. This is the start of you're entering your olive era. My salad is falafel and greens, looking very tasty. The falafel is the star of this salad. We'll be honest with ourselves. And we got crisps and fruit and beverages as well. Very well taken care of by Oxford Playhouse. I am now back post-lunch break at the Oxford Playhouse, and I still need to tell you about the show I saw just before lunch, Heavenly Bodies. This was the one where they were setting up a pole on the stage because it's about a struggling village church hall that decides to take on a pole dancing class immediately. This is a great concept. You know that this is going to some amazing places. It's a little bit Calendar Girls in that way. It's based on, again, some true accounts, and it talks about authenticity and being true to yourself in a local village community, which seems to be an enduring theme of the past couple of days at Beam. But there were some really winning moments in this. There was a part where we were seeing some breathtaking pole dancing choreography with this sacred religious singing happening over the top, and that was so incredibly striking that that's just a show in and of itself. That moment happened, you thought, yes, they really have something here, and it's those moments that I think people are looking out for at Beam. The show has been in workshops for the past couple of weeks at Bristol Old Vic, which is a big producing theatre here in the UK, so I'm excited to see what comes of that one. Now I'm heading back inside for a panel discussion. So there's been 3 panel discussions happening over this lunch period. Upstairs they're talking about representation in musical theatre, and in the auditorium now there's about to be a panel discussion on behalf of regional theatres, which we're very intrigued about, so we're going to go and listen to that one. I feel like we're back on the light colour scheme we started on yesterday morning. Oh, it looks blue and orange too. It looks like an iron brew in my camera viewfinder. It does. Aaron's laughing at me. But it's teal in real life. I need you to know that that's actually sort of a burnt umber and a teal sort of a colour. I appreciate the variety of lighting that we've had. I hope everyone else is as invested in it as I am. Also, shout out to this tech team who have been doing amazing work to keep this running smoothly and on a very tight schedule, because as you can imagine, all of these different new musical presentations have had very different setups. I mean, we had a poll here, we have different band configurations, different sound requirements, so for them to be transforming the space instantaneously between these musicals, shout out to them, because they're doing an amazing job. Oh my god, hey, just saw an amazing panel all about new musicals in regional theatre with representatives from venues like the Lowry and Theatre Clwyd and Birmingham Hippodrome, who have recently announced a huge new musical theatre department, which everyone in the room was very intrigued to hear more about, and has me very excited about the future of new musicals in the UK, which need nourishment and support, and curation was a word that got talked about a lot, and sort of people talking about the challenges of this and what it is that prompts them to take these risks, and there's a lot of great, like, questioning and provocation was a great word that was thrown around as well. But yeah, it made me really encouraged about the future of new British musical theatre, and a great reminder that it's not just going to come from London. New musicals are coming through, and they're coming through in all areas of the country, in all corners of the country, in Scottish theatres, in Welsh theatres. It's a very inspiring time. Oh my god, hey! So it's a few days later and I'm back in my flat to tell you about the last few new musical presentations that I got to see at Beam 2023. Again, on the second day of the conference on the Friday, we had to duck out a little bit early to head down to London for another press night. But there are 3 more new musicals I need to tell you about. First up was The Highwayman. This was written by Kitty Morgan. It describes itself as a tub-thumping pub sing-along which pits the year 1666 against modern-day issues of social injustice, violence against women, and the cost of living crisis. All themes that you've already heard me speaking about in this video. Certainly, the prevalent social issues that we're dealing with now seem to be inspiring a lot of new musical theatre writers, and I think that's fantastic. What are new musicals meant to do, if not speak directly to society right now? And this is another one, like #50 Days, that is historical as well as being topical. Inspired by Alfred Noy's classic poem, The Highwayman tells the story of a doomed love affair between self-confessed sociopath Duval and rip-roaring landlady Bess. And rip-roaring is an adjective I would readily describe this show with. It was fun, it was lively, it was merry, it was incredibly British. At moments, I got a sort of a horrible histories for grown-ups kind of a vibe, and that's something I'm very much here for. It features a majority female, inclusive, and neurodiverse cast, which I enjoy very much, and has a self-described pimped-up folk style, and they're seeking partners to produce a UK tour, which I think would be a great move for this show. I think touring around, gaining a little bit of momentum, I think that would be fantastic. Next up was Once Upon a Carnival, written by Leanne John-Baptiste, Perry Melius, and Trinaboy Juicy, and they do the best job at describing exactly what this show is themselves. Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, specifically the Brandy and Whitney Houston version, meets Rio, the movie, but with a Caribbean carnival twist. It's a modern take on Cinderella, and I know what you're thinking, haven't we had enough Cinderella stories? But here is a particular community and a particular culture that really hasn't ever been represented in the Cinderella story. This tells it from a Caribbean carnival perspective. So it's a modern twist on Cinderella about an unlucky girl whose fortune changes. Our CC is a black British urban princess who oozes black culture and is considered too much for the world around her. This piece describes its style as music, masquerade, melanin, and magic. The first draft of the book has been completed. They are currently in the process of writing the songs. And while the material is still in a very early stage, the vibes of this show are coming through very strongly. And there's so much fun they can have with the design of this and with the staging of this and the choreography, because it is giving you full carnival right there on the stage. They did a great job of bringing that to the stage of the Oxford Playhouse at Beam. And finally, Song of the Far Isles was the last presentation that we heard on Friday. This is another actor-musician musical conceived specifically for family audiences. I got that immediately. As a very quick side note, I like that people are writing specifically for a family audience. I think it's deceptively difficult to do, to write stuff that's going to be engaging and enchanting to kids. I think that's a really important whole subgenre of theatre that's giving young people and families this important first experience of going to the theatre. Basically what I want to say is writing for younger audiences shouldn't be considered either less than, like less prestigious, or easier. And so here we have this fantasy show designed for a family audience that isn't patronising. It's rich and sophisticated and enchanting and mystical and magical. Based on the book by Nick Bowling, it's full of magical, atmospheric, folky fun. Like I told you, so much folk at Beam this year, so much folk. Set in the fantasy world of the Far Isles, a place that lives and breathes music, where everyone is born with a birth instrument that represents them, like the demons in His Dark Materials. I often ask the question, why is this a musical? Is this the right form for this story to be adapted into? Does this need to be a musical? And this story makes so much sense to be adapted for a musical. It reminded me a little bit of Claws, the show that I saw last Christmas, but I think it has a slightly stronger and more coherent narrative. So I'm really excited for this. And the music was lovely and stirring and folky and, like I said, enchanting. I'm pretty sure I've used that adjective so many times, but it really was a very lovely presentation and a great way to finish our 2 days at Beam. I want to say thank you so much much to the event organisers for inviting me to come and give you guys a preview of this couple of days. I wish I could have seen every single show that performed. Apologies to the creators and the performers that I didn't get to see, but thank you so much to everyone who brought their musicals, who brought their work to Beam. It represented such an undertaking, and I hope it was a valuable experience for everyone involved. Thank you to everyone who came to hear us speak on the panel. Thank you to everyone else who was sitting alongside me on that panel and for our chair. And thank you to everyone who made Beam 2023 happen. I honestly had the best time. I hope that that came through in this video. I hope this gave you a flavour of what it's like, and I hope to be there again next year. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey. Thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!